They say the worst place to be during a mob war is in the crossfire. They're wrong. The worst place to be is on your knees, scrubbing their blood off the floor, holding the one secret that could destroy the city's most dangerous man. Welcome back to my diary once again. I'm Mimi, and tonight we find out what happens when the maid cleans up a little too much. Now, before we begin, what would you do in this situation? Drop a sponge emoji in the comments if you would mind your business, or a book emoji if you would look inside the ledger. The bleach burned her lungs. Skye Taylor ignored it, focusing on the rhythmic circles of her yellow rubber glove against the imported Italian marble. The penthouse was silent, save for the hum of the city 30 stories below and the wet slap of her sponge. She hated penthouse jobs. Too much open space. Too many windows. She scrubbed harder at a stubborn crimson stain near the base of the mahogany desk. The cleaners paid double for VIP suites, and her brother's hospital bills demanded triple. Her brush snagged on the edge of the Persian rug. She flipped the thick wool back, intending to hit the floor underneath, and froze. Wedged between the floorboard and the rug was a small, worn leather notebook. It wasn't standard office stationery. It looked old, used. Against every survival instinct she possessed, Skye reached out. Her gloved fingers peeled back the cover. The pages were dense with names, dates, and staggering strings of numbers. It wasn't a diary. It was a ledger. And the first name on the page made her blood turn to ice. Julian Rossi, the man who owned this penthouse, the man who currently decorated the far wall in a spray of abstract violence she hadn't gotten to yet. The heavy oak doors of the study slammed shut. The sound cracked like a whip in the silent room. Skye dropped the book, spinning on her knees. The lock clicked, a deadbolt engaging. He stood in the shadows near the entrance. Sang Hoon. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than her life. No tie. His collar rested open, revealing a sliver of collarbone. He held a suppressed pistol loose in his right hand, the barrel angled down. "You missed a spot," he said. His voice was smooth, carrying a slight rasp that vibrated in the quiet room. Skye stayed on her knees. Moving was a death sentence. Breathing felt like a risk. "I'm just the cleanup crew," she managed, keeping her voice level. "I don't see anything. I don't read anything." Sang Hoon stepped forward, the ambient light from the city illuminating sharp cheekbones and eyes devoid of warmth. He stopped inches from her. He didn't look at the blood on the wall. He looked at the leather book resting near her knee. "Pick it up." Skye hesitated. He raised the weapon, the metal cold and dull in the dim light. He pressed the silencer against the center of her forehead. "I said, pick it up." She grabbed the ledger. Her hands shook. "Read the first name," Sang Hoon ordered. Sang Hoon didn't lower the gun. He kept the barrel fixed on the center of her forehead. "Read it," he repeated, the command a low rumble in his chest. Skye forced her eyes to focus on the faded ink. "Victor Vance, $500,000, March 4th. She swallowed, the sound loud in the dead silence of the study. Warehouse district. The gun lowered, a fraction of an inch. Sang Hoon stepped back, giving her space to breathe, but not to run. He reached out and snatched the ledger from her grip. He didn't look at the book. He kept his eyes on her. "You clean for the cleaners," he stated. It wasn't a question. Skye nodded, keeping her hands visible, resting on her thighs. "I just scrub the floors. I don't ask questions." "You ask enough to know who I am." Sang Hoon flipped the ledger shut, sliding it into the interior pocket of his suit jacket. "And you know enough to know that finding this book is a death sentence." "I didn't open it on purpose," Skye lied. her voice steadying. "It caught on the rug. I'll finish the job and leave. You never saw me." A harsh sound left his throat, a laugh devoid of humor. "You don't leave, Skye." He knew her name. The realization hit her like physical blow. "You're an asset now." He turned his back to her, a display of absolute dominance. He walked toward the desk, sidestepping the pooling blood. "The man who owned this book," Sang Hoon said, gesturing vaguely to the mess near the wall, "was selling my roots. He was careless. You are not." He turned back to face her. "You have a job tonight at the Onyx Lounge. VIP room cleanup. 3 a.m. Skye's heart hammered against her ribs. The Onyx Lounge belonged to the rival syndicate. That's off limits. We don't cross lines. You do now. Sang Hoon picked up a thick stack of banded bills from the desk and tossed it, letting it land on the floor inches from her knees. You go in. You clean. But before you leave, you plant this under the center table. He tossed a small, heavy object. It landed next to the money. A matte, rectangular device, no bigger than a deck of cards. A listening bug. "I can't do that," Skye said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "If they catch me?" "If they catch you, they kill you," Sang Hoon interrupted, his tone conversational. "If you refuse me, I kill you right now. Pick it up." She looked at the device, then up at him. She was trapped in a cage with a predator, and he had just handed her the leash. She grabbed the bug and the money, shoving them into the deep pockets of her coveralls. 3 hours later, the base of the Onyx Lounge rattled Skye's teeth. The VIP room was a wreck of spilled liquor and broken glass. She moved with practiced efficiency, sweeping, scrubbing, erasing the evidence of the night's excess. She reached the center table. She checked the door. Locked. She pulled the bug from her pocket, her fingers slick with sweat inside her fresh black rubber gloves. She crawled under the heavy glass table, reaching for the metal crossbar to secure the magnetic device. Her hand brushed something else, something thick. Wires. Skye yanked her flashlight from her belt and clicked it on. Taped to the underside of the table, connected to a digital timer, was a thick brick of plastic explosive. The timer read 30 seconds. Skye froze, her mind racing to process the tangled wires. She had half a minute to disarm a military-grade explosive or run. The timer hit 3. Skye didn't think. Instinct took over. She threw herself backward, scrambling away from the heavy glass table. 2. She hit the far wall of the VIP room, her shoulder colliding with wood paneling. 1. The world turned white. A wall of heat slammed into her, stealing the air from her lungs. The sound wasn't a bang. It was a physical force that ruptured the silence, a roar that tore through the club. The floor heaved upward. The ceiling shattered, raining plaster and twisted metal. Darkness crashed over her, absolute and suffocating. Skye woke to the taste of dust and the sharp sting of debris biting into her cheek. Her ears rang, a high, continuous whine that drowned out everything else. She tried to move her right arm. A sharp, hot pain flared from her shoulder, pinning her in place. A heavy beam lay across her chest, trapping her in a narrow pocket of air. She coughed, the dust coating her throat like chalk. Panic clawed at her chest. She was buried. Skye. The voice was faint, distorted by the ringing in her ears, but she recognized the harsh edge. She turned her head, fighting the ache in her neck. Through the haze of swirling dust, a beam of light cut across the wreckage. It swept over shattered concrete and twisted rebar before locking onto her face. Sang Hoon knelt beside her. His immaculate suit was torn, coated in a thick layer of gray ash. A thin line of blood ran from a cut near his temple, stark against his pale skin. He holstered a flashlight, his expression unreadable. "You're alive," he stated, the words clipped. "Barely," Skye rasped, her voice thick with grit. She looked at the beam pinning her down. "Get it off me." Sang Hoon didn't move. He leaned closer. In the tight confines of the rubble, the air between them felt charged, heavy with the scent of explosives and copper. "I tailed you. I didn't trust you to follow orders without running," he said, his tone devoid of sympathy. "I told you to plant the device. I didn't tell you to detonate the room. It was already there," Skye shot back, anger piercing through the pain. C4, under the table, set to blow. Sang Hoon's eyes narrowed. He assessed the damage, his gaze sweeping over her trapped form. He reached out, his hand gripping the edge of the wooden beam across her chest. "Brace yourself," he ordered. He didn't wait for her to agree. He braced his boots against the rubble and heaved. The beam groaned in protest. Fire shot through Skye's shoulder, a blinding, white-hot agony. She bit her lip to keep from screaming, tasting blood. The wood shifted, rising inches. It was enough. "Move," he commanded, his voice strained. Skye scrambled backward, ignoring the pain, dragging herself free from the trap. She collapsed against a slab of concrete, gasping for air. Sang Hoon dropped the beam. The sound echoed in the confined space. He ejected the magazine of his pistol, checked the rounds, and slammed it back into the base. The metallic click was loud in the silence. "The exit is blocked," he said, turning toward a narrow gap in the wreckage that led deeper into the club's basement. "And the men who set that bomb will be coming to check their work." He held out a hand. Skye stared at it. Taking his hand meant stepping further into his world, but staying behind meant dying in the dark. The flashlight beam cut through the dust, missing Skye's face by a fraction of an inch. Sang Hoon grabbed her good shoulder, hauling her into a narrow ventilation shaft just as boots crunched over the debris they had occupied moments before. They crawled in silence. The metallic scent of blood and ash filled the cramped space. Skye focused on the rhythmic sound of Sang Hoon's breathing ahead of her. He moved with mechanical precision, unbothered by the confined space or the men hunting them above. They dropped from the vent into a rain-slicked alley. A dark SUV idled near the dumpsters, engine humming. A driver stepped out, holding the back door open. Sang Hoon gestured for her to get in. Skye hesitated. The street at the end of the alley offered a chance, a slim one. "Run and those men will find you," Sang Hoon stated, his voice a low rumble over the engine noise. "Get in and you live." She climbed into the leather interior. Sang Hoon slid in beside her, the doors locked with a heavy, final thud. The SUV merged into the city traffic, leaving the burning Onyx lounge behind. Sang Hoon pulled a phone from his pocket. He tapped the screen. He didn't dial, he just spoke into the receiver. "Account 074. Clear the Taylor medical debt at Street. Jude's. Then wire $500,000 to the cleaner's holding account. The girl's contract is mine." Skye stopped breathing. The pain in her injured shoulder vanished, replaced by a sharp spike of dread. "What did you do?" Sang Hoon ended the call. He turned to face her, the streetlights painting sharp shadows across his bruised face. "Your brother's hospital bills are paid in full, $200,000, wiped clean. I didn't ask for your charity." "It is not charity," he corrected. He leaned closer, the scent of smoke and expensive cologne filling the tight space. "I bought your contract from the cleaners. You belong to me now." Panic flared in her chest. She grabbed the door handle, pulling it, locked. The SUV turned off the main road, climbing a steep, winding path into the hills. Iron gates loomed in the headlights, massive and imposing. The gates parted, revealing a sprawling stone estate isolated from the rest of the world. The vehicle parked in a circular driveway. Sang Hoon stepped out, buttoning his ruined suit jacket as if preparing for a board meeting. He looked back at her, his gaze possessive and absolute. "Welcome home, Skye." Sunlight poured through the massive windows of the estate's east wing. Skye stood in the center of the sprawling guest room. A rolling rack of designer clothes sat in the corner. Silk, cashmere, velvet. She ignored them. She wore her standard gray work coveralls, retrieved from the battered duffel bag Sang Hoon's men had fetched from her apartment in the middle of the night. She grabbed her thick rubber gloves and a heavy plastic bucket, marching out of the suite and down the grand corridor. She found Sang Hoon in his private study. He sat behind a heavy oak desk, reviewing a stack of shipping manifests. He wore a crisp white shirt, cuffs rolled to the elbows, a stark contrast to the violence of the night before. The bruise on his jaw stood out against his pale skin. Skye didn't knock. She walked in, dropped the bucket on the floor, and pulled a bottle of chemical cleaner from her belt. Sang Hoon raised his head. His dark gaze swept over her coveralls. "I instructed the staff to provide you with a wardrobe," he stated, his voice a flat, authoritative rumble. "I am a cleaner," Skye replied. She dropped to her knees near the leather sofa and began scrubbing a faint scuff mark on the baseboard. $200,000 is a lot of hours. I am starting my shift." He set his pen down. The silence in the room thickened. "You do not clean my house, Skye." "You bought my contract," she shot back, scrubbing the wood with rigid, aggressive strokes. "This is what I do. I make messes disappear. I do not wear silk and play house guest." Sang Hoon stood. He walked around the desk. His leather shoes made zero sound on the floor. He stopped right beside her. He reached down, grabbing her wrist, forcing her hand to stop moving. His grip was a vice, hot and absolute. "Look at me," he commanded. Skye jerked her head up. The proximity stole the air from her lungs. His eyes held a dangerous, unyielding heat. "You are not the maid anymore," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You are mine. Your time, your safety, your presence, all mine. Do not insult me by pretending you are still scrubbing baseboards for tips." Skye opened her mouth to fight back. A flicker of crimson light caught her attention. It danced across Sang Hoon's pristine white shirt. Then it shifted, tracking downward. A perfect, solid red dot settled right over the center of Skye's chest. Sang Hoon's eyes tracked the light, his expression fractured. The window exploded. Shards of reinforced glass rained down like jagged ice. Sang Hoon lunged. He hit Skye waist high, driving her to the floor. A sharp crack echoed through the study. Dust erupted from the drywall behind them, right where Skye's chest had been a second prior. Sang Hoon covered her. His weight pinned her down. His suit smelled of gunpowder and expensive wool. He kept his head low, his dark eyes scanning the shattered window frame. "Stay down," he ordered. His voice was a harsh rasp against her ear. Skye couldn't breathe. The impact stole the air from her lungs. The heat radiating from him was intense, an absolute contrast to the cold air rushing through the broken window. Another shot rang out. It struck the heavy oak desk, sending splinters of wood flying into the air. Sang Hoon grabbed her arm. "Crawl. To the hallway. Now." They scrambled over the Persian rug, keeping their bodies flat against the wood. Sang Hoon drew his weapon, keeping the barrel aimed at the breach. They reached the thick doorframe and rolled into the grand corridor. Sang Hoon slammed the heavy door shut. He pressed his back against the wall, chest heaving. A thin stream of blood trickled from a shallow cut on his jaw where glass had grazed him. He checked his gun, his jaw clenched tight. The flat, authoritative mask cracked, revealing raw, unfiltered rage. "That glass is ballistic rated," he stated. "It takes a specialized round to penetrate." Skye pushed herself up, sitting against the opposite wall. Her hands shook. They missed. They didn't miss. The glass altered the trajectory. It was meant for my heart, or yours. He looked at her. The dangerous heat returned to his gaze. "We changed rooms 3 minutes ago. No one outside the perimeter could track that movement through the tinted windows." Skye met his eyes. The realization hit them both at the exact same moment. "Someone inside told them," Skye said. "A rat in my house," Sang Hoon confirmed. He holstered his weapon. The silence in the corridor felt heavier than the gunfire. "My security detail will lock down the estate. They will tear the grounds apart looking for the shooter." Ass. He stepped closer, towering over her. "The staff won't talk to my men. They fear them, but they do not fear a cleaner." Skye grabbed her rubber gloves from the floor. "I am not a spy. You are whatever I need you to be to keep us breathing," he countered. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "You blend into the walls, Skye. You scrub the dirt. Go find out who let the dirt in." Skye kept her head down. The wet mop squeaked against the marble. She reached the east corridor, stopping right outside the main security hub. The keypad blinked red. She had watched the head of security punch it in from down the hall, but the angle was bad. She pulled a small bottle of talcum powder from her belt. A quick puff confirmed the 4 exact digits she suspected. 4, 7, 9, 0. The heavy door clicked. She slipped inside, plunging into the cold, humming darkness of the server room. Banks of monitors glowed, displaying every angle of the massive estate. She leaned close to the main console. Camera 4 showed the underground garage. Jin, Sang Hoon's right-hand man, paced between 2 armored SUVs. He held a burner phone tight to his ear. Skye tapped the audio feed button. Static hissed. A harsh whisper filled the tight space. "The sniper missed," Jin spat. "The Don is paranoid. He locked down the perimeter." A pause. Jin dragged a hand over his face. "Tomorrow at dawn, I will disable the north gate sensors during the shift change. Bring the heavy gear. We wipe out the entire suite. I will, woman, I will." Skye stopped breathing. Jin was selling the estate. He was handing Sang Hoon over to the slaughter. She reached into her pocket to grab her phone. Her elbow knocked a stack of empty hard drive cases off the desk. They hit the floor. The clatter echoed off the walls. On monitor 4, Jin stopped pacing. His head snapped toward the garage camera. He looked right into the lens. A cold dread spiked in Skye's chest. "Someone is on the feed," Jin snarled into the phone. "Hold the line." Skye lunged for the exit. She grabbed the handle. It didn't turn. A shadow blocked the sliver of light under the door. The electronic lock beeped, flashing from red to green. The door swung open, pinning Skye against the server racks. Jin stood in the threshold. He gripped a suppressed pistol in his right hand. His eyes locked onto her gray coveralls, then drifted up to her face. A cruel, dead smile crept across his mouth. "The invisible maid," Jin stated. He raised the gun, aiming right between her eyes. Not so invisible anymore. Jin tightened his grip on the gun. He never got to pull the trigger. A shot ruptured the air. Jin screamed. His arm snapped back. His suppressed pistol hit the floor, sliding across the cold tiles. Sang Hoon stepped through the doorway. Smoke drifted from the barrel of his weapon. He did not hesitate. He closed the distance in 2 massive strides, driving his boot into Jin's knee. Bone cracked. Jin collapsed, gasping in agony. Skye pressed her spine against the server racks. She could not breathe. Sang Hoon holstered his gun. He grabbed Jin by the collar of his tactical shirt, hauling him up and slamming him against the metal wall. The servers rattled. Sang Hoon's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated violence. "The North Gate," Sang Hoon stated, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "Who did you sell the codes to?" Jin spat blood onto Sang Hoon's ruined white shirt. "You are a dead man. They are coming." Sang Hoon did not blink. He delivered a brutal, mechanical strike to Jin's ribs. Another crack echoed in the tight space. Jin choked. The defiance vanished from his eyes, replaced by raw terror. "I will ask one more time," Sang Hoon whispered, pressing his forearm against Jin's throat. "Give me the name." Skye watched the executioner work. The composed, elegant billionaire was an illusion. This was the true Dawn, a predator built for slaughter. The sheer brutality of his actions sent a shiver down her spine, yet a twisted, undeniable sense of safety anchored her to the floor. He was a monster, but he was tearing apart the man who tried to kill her. Jin wheezed out a name. Sang Hoon dropped him. The traitor crumpled into an unconscious heap. Silence returned to the server room, heavy and suffocating. Sang Hoon turned. His chest heaved. Blood stained his knuckles. He locked eyes with Skye. The wild, dark heat in his gaze made her heart pound against her ribs. He stepped closer, closing her in against the blinking machinery. He reached out, his thumb brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "You see it now," Sang Hoon murmured, his face inches from hers. "You see what I am?" He leaned in, the scent of gunpowder and copper wrapping around her. "Tell me you are not terrified." The server room fans hummed in the background. Skye stood frozen against the racks. Sang Hoon's face remained inches from hers. The heavy scent of gunpowder lingered in the cold air. "Get your things," he ordered. The dangerous warmth in his voice vanished, replaced by a cold, tactical edge. "We leave in 20 minutes. "Leave?" Skye pushed against the server rack, creating a sliver of space. "Where are we going?" Jin sold the access codes to the Yamato syndicate, Sang Hoon stated. He turned away, checking the magazine of his pistol before sliding it into his shoulder holster. "They expect me to be blind. They expect me to stay locked inside this estate, waiting for an attack. We are going to disappoint them." He looked back at her. "There is a charity gala at the Grand Horizon. Kenji Yamato will be there. I am going to have a conversation with him." "And what does that have to do with me?" "You found the rat. You have an eye for details people try to hide." He stepped toward the exit, pausing at the threshold. "You are coming with me, as my guest." An hour later, the massive oak doors to the master suite clicked shut. Skye stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling mirror. She felt entirely exposed. The dress was a deep, rich crimson. It was silk, cut close to her body, with a slit that reached her thigh. The fabric clung to her curves, a stark contrast to the heavy, shapeless coveralls she lived in. One of the estate's private maids, working at breakneck speed, had pulled her hair into a sleek, elegant twist. It was a disguise, a very expensive, very dangerous disguise. The suite door opened. Sang Hoon walked in. He wore a tuxedo. It was flawless, tailored to emphasize the broad line of his shoulders. The sharp cut of the suit magnified the predatory grace in his movements. He stopped a few feet away, his dark eyes swept over her. The silence in the room stretched tight, heavy and charged. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, his gaze intense, assessing every line of the dress. "Turn around," he murmured. Skye hesitated, then turned, facing the mirror again. The dress featured an open back, exposing the smooth skin between her shoulder blades. Sang Hoon stepped up behind her. She watched him in the mirror. He reached out. His knuckles brushed against her bare spine. The heat of his touch sent a jolt straight to her chest. He caught the small clasp at the top of the zipper. "You stand beside me tonight," he said, his voice a low vibration near her ear. He pulled the zipper up the final inch. The fabric tightened around her waist. "You do not speak unless spoken to. You watch the room. If you see a weapon, if you see a threat, you touch my arm." He leaned closer, his reflection locking eyes with hers in the glass. "Do you understand?" The Grand Horizon Ballroom was a masterclass in deception. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over hundreds of the city's most dangerous people, dressed in imported silk and tailored wool. A string quartet played a soft, classical piece that failed to mask the predatory tension humming in the air. Skye walked beside Sang Hoon. The heavy crimson dress moved with her, forcing her to adopt a slow, measured pace. She kept her head up, her gaze sweeping the room just as she did when assessing a fresh crime scene. 3 o'clock, she murmured, her voice barely carrying over the music. 2 men by the ice sculpture. Cheap suits, bulges under the left arm, not local security. Sang Hoon didn't break his stride. He offered a slight nod to a passing dignitary. "Yamato's vanguard. They are looking for a reaction. Give them nothing. He guided her toward the center of the room, parting the crowd through sheer presence. Conversations paused as they passed. Eyes tracked them. Skye felt the weight of the scrutiny, a physical pressure against her skin. She forced her breathing to remain steady. A man detached himself from a group near the main bar. He was older, his hair silver, his posture relaxed. He wore a traditional dark suit, but the aura of violence surrounding him was palpable. "Kenji Yamato." Sang Hoon stopped. The space between the 2 men felt charged, heavy with unspoken threats. "Sang Hoon," Yamato greeted. His smile did not reach his eyes. "A bold choice, attending a public gala after the disturbances at your estate." "A minor issue," Sang Hoon replied, his tone smooth, devoid of inflection. "Pests in the walls. Extermination is already underway." Yamato's gaze shifted. He looked at Skye. The assessment was cold, absolute, and deeply invasive. "And who is this? A new acquisition? She lacks the usual polish of your circle." "And she is mine," Sang Hoon stated. The possessiveness in his voice was a physical barrier, sharp and immovable. "That is the only detail you need." "Fascinating," Yamato mused. He stepped closer to Skye. "A diamond in the rough. Or perhaps just a pawn you placed on the board to distract me." Yamato reached out, his hand moving towards Skye's bare shoulder. Skye didn't flinch. She tracked the movement. She saw the heavy gold ring on his index finger. She saw the slight tremor in his wrist. A man used to giving orders, not throwing punches. Before Yamato's skin touched hers, Sang Hoon shifted. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped into the negative space between them, his broad shoulder breaking Yamato's line of sight. "Do not touch what belongs to me," Sang Hoon said. The words were quiet. They carried the weight of a death sentence. Yamato's cold gaze shifted from Sang Hoon to Skye. A mocking smirk touched his lips. "You issued death threats? Over a stray?" Skye stepped out from the shadow of Sang Hoon's broad shoulder. The fear vanished, replaced by the cold, analytical detachment she used to scrub crime scenes. "The bartender," Skye stated, her voice cut through the heavy tension. Yamato frowned. "What?" "The bartender near your vanguard by the ice sculpture," Skye continued, pointing a single manicured finger across the room. "He wiped the counter 3 times in 5 minutes. No spills. He wears a standard uniform, but his shoes are tactical boots with reinforced toes. He poured your men champagne, but he kept his thumb over the rim of the glass. The liquid is compromised." Yamato's head snapped toward the bar. The bartender froze, his eyes locking with the rival boss. Panic flared in the fake server's expression. "You have a rat in your own house, Kenji," Sang Hoon said. The triumph in his voice was absolute. "Tend to your mess." Sang Hoon placed a hand on the small of Skye's back, guiding her away. They left Yamato standing frozen amidst his enemies. They bypassed the grand staircase, taking the private elevator to the underground garage. The silence between them felt electric. They reached the armored SUV. Sang Hoon opened the door. Skye climbed into the leather interior. He slid in beside her. The heavy doors locked. The privacy partition slid up, sealing them in absolute isolation. The engine roared to life. Sang Hoon turned to her. The streetlights flashed through the tinted glass, illuminating the primal, dangerous heat in his dark eyes. He did not look at her like a cleaner anymore. He looked at her like an equal, a weapon. "You broke protocol," he murmured. "I told you not to speak." "You told me to spot the dirt," Skye shot back, her chest heaving with lingering adrenaline. "I saw dirt. I cleaned it." Sang Hoon moved. He crossed the negative space between them in a heartbeat. His large hands framed her face, his thumbs tracking the line of her jaw. The scent of gunpowder and rich cologne enveloped her. He crashed his mouth over hers. The kiss was a collision, raw, aggressive, and steeped in violence. Skye gasped against his lips, her hands rising to grip the lapels of his tuxedo. The barrier between them shattered. He pulled her closer, his grip possessive, erasing the rest of the world. The burner phone ringing in the SUV shattered the illusion. Skye used the distraction to push Sang Hoon away. She spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling of her guest room, the taste of gunpowder and mint still burning her lips. Now, morning sunlight pierced the high windows. Skye grabbed her battered canvas duffel bag. She shoved her gray coveralls and a few stolen bottles of chemical cleaner inside. The kiss was a mistake. It crossed a line she could never uncross. In this world, becoming a boss's weakness meant becoming a target. She hauled the bag over her shoulder. She slipped out of the suite, moving with the silent, measured steps of a ghost. The estate staff were busy in the east wing. She bypassed the grand staircase, using the service corridors she mapped out 2 days prior. The cold morning air hit her lungs as she exited through the kitchen delivery door. Gravel crunched under her boots. She kept to the tree line, eyes fixed on the massive iron gates at the edge of the property. Freedom sat right on the other side of those bars. Skye reached the gatehouse. The security booth stood empty, a rare lapse. She reached for the pedestrian release lever. Tires crunched on the gravel behind her. Skye spun around. A dark SUV rolled to a stop 10 feet away, the engine cut off. Sang Hoon stepped out of the driver's side. He wore a crisp, dark shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He did not look angry. He looked absolute. "Going somewhere?" he asked. His voice carried a cold, unyielding weight in the crisp air. "I finished my shift," Skye countered, gripping the strap of her bag. "The gala is over. You found the rat. We are done." Sang Hoon walked toward her, He stopped at the front bumper of the SUV. He reached back and pulled the rear door open. "We are not done," Sang Hoon stated. "Yamato is mobilizing. The city is a war zone. You are a vulnerability out there. A figure stepped out of the back seat. He wore a faded hospital hoodie and leaned heavy on a pair of metal crutches. Skye felt the blood drain from her face. Her knees threatened to give out. "Leo," she whispered. Her little brother squinted in the bright sunlight, looking from the massive stone estate to his sister. "Skye? These guys said you worked here now." Sang Hoon locked eyes with Skye. The raw possession in his gaze stripped away every ounce of her defiance. He had not just bought her debt. He possessed her only reason for living. "I brought him here for his protection," Sang Hoon murmured. His voice meant only for her ears. "Welcome home, Skye." The perimeter alarm shrieked. It cut through the crisp morning air, sharp and relentless. Smoke plumed near the main gate. The massive iron bars twisted inward, rammed by a heavy armored transport truck. "Get down!" Sang Hoon ordered. He grabbed Leo by the hoodie and shoved him behind the thick stone pillar of the gatehouse. He hooked his free arm around Skye's waist, pulling her flush against his side. Gunfire erupted. Concrete chipped and exploded all around them. Sang Hoon drew his weapon. He fired precise, controlled shots toward the breach. "My men will hold the line. We move to the vault." Sang Hoon. "Who are they?" Leo yelled, his hands covering his ears. "Yamato," Skye stated. She clutched her canvas duffel bag against her chest. Sang Hoon turned to her. Ash dusted his dark shirt. "He wants the ledger. He knows you survived the blast. He knows you have it." More armored vehicles poured through the broken gate. Dozens of men in tactical gear spilled onto the gravel, advancing on the main house. Sang Hoon grabbed her arm, hauling her toward the east wing entrance. They sprinted across the open courtyard. Bullets bit into the dirt at their heels. They reached the entrance, slammed the heavy oak doors shut, and engaged the steel deadbolts. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the heavy leather ledger, and shoved it into her hands. "Stay in the reinforced corridor," Sang Hoon commanded. He checked his weapon, his jaw tight with raw fury. "Guard that book. Keep your brother behind you." He turned back toward the front of the house, charging back into the firefight to defend his territory. Skye sank to the marble floor, pulling Leo down with her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She unzipped the duffel bag. She reached past her chemical cleaners and pulled out the worn leather book. Yamato wanted this object bad enough to start a full-scale war. She opened it. The pages flickered under the red emergency lights. Names and dates lined the margins, but the center columns held the true secret. She traced the long strings of digits. 12 numbers, 16 numbers, routing codes, access pins, offshore banking sequences. This was not a list of targets or blackmail material. This was the master key. The ledger contained the entire financial foundation of Sang Hoon's empire. Billions of dollars, untraceable and ready to transfer. She held his entire life in her hands. A harsh, amplified voice boomed from the courtyard outside, cutting through the chaos. "Send the cleaner out with the book, or we burn the estate to the ground with you inside." The oak doors splintered. A massive armored ram broke through the center panels, sending sharp shards of wood flying across the marble foyer. Gunsmoke choked the air. Sang Hoon stood near the grand staircase. He fired precise shots, dropping 2 men in tactical gear as they poured through the breach. He moved with lethal precision, but the numbers were impossible. "Move!" Sang Hoon roared over the chaos. He kept his focus on the entrance, trusting Skye to follow his previous command. Skye clutched Leo's arm, She dragged him down the reinforced east corridor. As they ran, she snatched a dropped pistol from the floor, shoving it deep into her coverall pocket. The heavy leather ledger burned against her ribs inside her jacket. The sounds of slaughter echoed behind them. They reached the end of the hall. A steel service door sat in the shadows. Skye punched in the 4-digit code she memorized during her cleaning shifts. The deadbolt disengaged with a heavy clack. Cold morning air rushed in. The hidden path led straight to the tree line and absolute freedom. "Come on!" Leo yelled. He stepped into the damp grass, gripping his metal crutches. "We have to go!" Skye stepped onto the threshold. She looked out at the trees. Her freedom secured. The ledger held enough leverage to buy them new identities anywhere in the world. A fresh burst of gunfire erupted from the foyer, followed by a sickening, heavy thud. Skye froze. She turned her head. Through the long, smoke-filled corridor, she saw Sang Hoon. He was cornered against the base of the staircase. His weapon clicked empty. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him around. Yamato's men advanced, raising their rifles. Sang Hoon locked eyes with her down the hall. He didn't ask for help. He didn't shout. He gave her a single, definitive nod. Go. He was giving up his life to ensure her escape. The ruthless kingpin chose the invisible Maid over his own empire. Leo tugged her sleeve. "Skye, please!" Yamato stepped into the foyer. He pulled a gold-plated pistol from his coat, aiming right at Sang Hoon's chest. Skye looked at the open door. She looked at the man bleeding on the marble. She reached into the deep pocket of her coveralls, her fingers wrapping around the cold steel of a discarded weapon she had scooped off the marble floor during the chaos. The steel door locked tight. Leo gasped, stumbling back on his crutches. Skye did not look at her brother. She raised the heavy pistol. She had never fired a weapon in combat, but she spent years scrubbing the aftermath. She knew the exact angles where bullets did the most damage. Yamato stood over Sang Hoon, his finger tightening on the gold-plated trigger. Skye squeezed hers first. The recoil sent a shockwave up her arm. The bullet shattered the marble pillar right beside Yamato's head. Concrete dust exploded outward, blinding the rival boss. Yamato cursed, staggering backward. He swung his weapon toward the new threat. Sang Hoon did not waste the fraction of a second. He lunged. Despite the blood soaking his shirt, he moved with raw, predatory power. He drove his shoulder into Yamato's chest, tackling the older man to the floor. The gold gun clattered across the tiles. Sang Hoon pinned Yamato down. He drew his combat knife from his boot and drove it through the collar of Yamato's expensive coat, pinning the fabric to the hardwood floor. Outside the broken gates, sirens wailed. Sang Hoon's perimeter reinforcements poured into the courtyard. The remaining rival soldiers dropped their weapons, recognizing the shift in power. Their boss lay defeated on the ground. The war was over. Silence fell over the ruined foyer, broken by the sound of heavy breathing and distant alarms. Sang Hoon stood. He ignored the men rushing to secure the room. He ignored the blood dripping from his shoulder. He walked straight toward the reinforced corridor. Skye lowered the gun. Her hands shook, the adrenaline crashing through her veins. The leather ledger sat heavy in her jacket pocket. Sang Hoon stopped inches from her. He looked at the locked service door. He looked at the gun in her hand. The ruthless, absolute control in his dark eyes melted into something far more dangerous. Complete obsession. "You stayed," he murmured. "You missed a spot." Skye breathed out, gesturing to the chaos behind him. A dark, possessive smirk crossed his face. He reached out, taking the gun from her trembling fingers and tossing it to the floor. His hand slid to her shoulders, gripping the rough fabric of her gray coveralls. He pulled her flush against his chest, uncaring of the blood transferring between them. "You are done cleaning up after other men," Sang Hoon stated, his voice a low vibration against her skin. "From this moment on, you stand beside me. You give the orders." He crashed his mouth over hers, sealing the promise in front of his entire surviving crew. Skye wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. The invisible maid was gone. The new queen of the empire had arrived. "We made it to the end of today's diary. The floor is clean, the enemies are gone, and our girl traded her rubber gloves for a crown. But true power does not mean you stop getting your hands dirty. Let's take one last look at the king and his new queen." Skye sat on the edge of the massive mahogany desk. She wore a tailored crimson suit, no silk dresses. A disassembled Glock 19 rested on a velvet cloth next to her thigh. She rubbed a brush coated in solvent over the barrel. Old habits died hard. Sang Hoon stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the sprawling city. The streets were quiet. His territory was secure. He turned, holding a slim tablet, his dark eyes locking onto her. "The offshore shell corporations finalized the transfer," Sang Hoon stated. He walked over, setting the screen beside her weapon parts. "Yamato's remaining assets are washed. We integrated the funds into the new commercial real estate holdings." Skye set the brush down. She picked up the tablet, scanning the intricate spreadsheets. "Commercial real estate takes too much time to wash a volume this high," Skye corrected, her tone sharp and analytical. "We need a faster cycle to keep the IRS blind. Art acquisition. We buy high-value private sale paintings using anonymous proxies. We store the canvases in overseas free ports. No taxes, zero federal oversight. The dirty cash becomes untraceable equity. When we need liquid capital, we borrow clean money from banks using the art as collateral." Sang Hoon leaned against the desk right beside her. A dangerous, arrogant smile curved his lips. He watched her reassemble the slide of the gun with practiced, lethal precision. "You memorized the ledger," he noted. "I improved it," Skye countered. She slammed the magazine into the grip. The heavy click echoed across the silent penthouse. "We are not just surviving a war. We are building an institution. Legitimate fronts protect the underground foundation." He reached out, his large hand wrapped around the barrel of the weapon, pushing it down to the desk. His other hand slid behind her neck, his fingers twisting into her hair, pulling her flush against his chest. "I built a syndicate," Sang Hoon murmured, his voice a low, possessive rumble against her skin. "You are building an empire." He crashed his mouth over hers. The kiss was absolute, a brand of ownership and equal power. Skye dropped the weapon. Her hands gripped the lapels of his suit, pulling him closer, erasing the space between them. The scent of gun solvent and expensive cologne filled the air. The city outside belonged to them. The invisible maid vanished forever. The new queen ruled the board.